From the moment the lights went out in Mexico City, you could feel the tension, not just because of the altitude or the crowd, but because the first few corners at Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez compress everything into a very small margin for error. The race started 4 wide into turn 1. That opening scramble set the tone. But the real turning point, the moment people debated for days after, came on lap 6 at turn 4. You saw it on broadcast. A small lockup, dust, a grass trail, and Charles, Hamilton's Ferrari, rejoining the track ahead of Max. It looked like something many drivers have done in the past, an instinctive correction when the car steps out. But thanks to modern timing systems and telemetry, what looked like a recovery on TV became a red number in the steward's control room. What the cameras showed was nearly instantaneous. A twitch, a short excursion onto the green, a dramatic little puff of dirt, and then Hamilton back on the racing line. What the telemetry showed was a timeline of numbers, brake pressure spikes, a precise loss of longitudinal grip, wheel speed changes, and most importantly, a GPS time delta that read roughly 0.4 of a second faster than Valtteri Max's last microsector. That 0.43 second number is what turned a brief moment into a penalty. So let's walk through it slowly, because the difference between racing and advantage in the FIA rulebook often comes down to fractions that you can barely hear on commentary, but that are deafening in the steward's data feeds. At speed, the options a driver has are tiny. Hamilton, pinned on the outside, faced a decision in a heartbeat. Back off and potentially lose the position, or hold the line, accept the car sliding, and trust your ability to keep it on the asphalt. He chose the latter. The car grabbed traction again, and by the time the stewards had their overlays and sector comparisons, the stopwatch had done its cold work. Now, you might be thinking, but he lost time, and afterward because the tyres cooled or the car needed a few corners to recover. And that's a fair and important point. Ferrari's engineers argued precisely that. The off was self-correcting. The surface temperature of the tyres, the drop in mechanical grip, and even the altitude effects meant any minute gain was quickly erased. The problem for the stewards is that intent isn't in the telemetry. Only position and time are. You either rejoin ahead or you don't. And in this case, the GPS trace said Hamilton was ahead and the microsector delta said he was faster. So what does that mean in plain language? It means modern F1 judges both what you did and how long it changed the scoreboard. The rule that mentions lasting advantage gives the stewards discretion, and that discretion is both necessary and contentious. It's necessary because every track, every car, and every incident has nuance. It's contentious because data can feel absolute when the human moment that produced the data was anything but. Here's a gut check for you, and I want you to answer in the comments in one sentence. Did Hamilton gain an unfair advantage when he rejoined ahead? Type simply yes or no and add one short reason why. While you type that, if you appreciate breakdowns like this and want more of them, consider subscribing to the channel. We're pushing hard to reach 2,000 subscribers, and your subscribe plus a like helps us justify making more deep dives like this one. Now, coming back to the incident, visually it was minor, numerically it mattered. That tension between what you see and what the telemetry says is what made the lap 6 moment feel like a courtroom instead of a track. And that tension will be the hinge of our next chapter, where we dive into the telemetry numbers themselves and why a 0.43 second delta carried more weight than a driver's explanation. If you want that deeper data breakdown, the brake pressure peaks, the grip loss in raw units, and how the stewards translate a GPS time into a penalty, stick around. Next up, we'll pull those figures apart and show you exactly how the control room turned dust on camera into a 5-second decision on the timing screen. When we talk about penalties like the one Hamilton received in Mexico, we're really talking about two completely different languages trying to describe the same event: human instinct and digital data. To the naked eye, what happened looked like a brief lockup, a harmless off, and a quick rejoin. But to the FIA's control room, it was all about the numbers. Every car on the grid feeds roughly 300 gigabytes of telemetry data over a race weekend. Brake pressures, steering angles, wheel speeds, GPS coordinates, and energy recovery systems all speaking in fractions of a second. When Hamilton ran wide on lap 6, that data turned from engineering information into evidence. The brake pressure hit 131 bar, about 5 higher than Ferrari's modelled limit. Longitudinal grip dropped 17%, exactly when the front axle unloaded. In simpler terms, the car didn't stop the way simulations predicted. Add in the altitude, 2,200 meters above sea level, and the thinner air meant the car's downforce was weaker than normal. It wasn't a mistake born of recklessness. It was the physics of Mexico deciding how much control a driver could really have. But here's where the conversation turns complicated. The FIA's telemetry overlay compared Hamilton's line to Max's through the same section. On not all that overlay, the rejoin trace, Hamilton's GPS path back onto the racing surface showed a 0.43 second advantage at the next split. Under Article 33.3 of the sporting regulations, anything that produces a lasting advantage after leaving the track is grounds for a penalty. The words sound clear, but lasting advantage is intentionally vague. It gives the stewards discretion, which in Formula One is both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that every incident can be judged in context. The curse is that context is subjective. The FIA's analysts argued that Hamilton's position ahead of Max after the rejoin proved the advantage was real and measurable. Ferrari's engineers countered that any advantage was immediately cancelled out by overheated tyres, dirty pickup, and the loss of grip through the next few corners. Both were right in their own way. Telemetry can measure what happened, not why it happened. It can tell you that the Ferrari rejoined 0.43 seconds faster, but not that. Hamilton's instinct was to keep the car under control rather than gain ground. This is where Formula One becomes a paradox. It's a sport that prides itself on precision, yet depends on interpretation. The stopwatch can quantify every millisecond, but it can't quantify decision-making at 300 kilometers per hour. Imagine being in the cockpit. You lock up, the car slides, your brain calculates dozens of variables in a flash. Steering correction, throttle modulation, the car behind you, and your body acts before you even think. That's instinct. But once you step out of the car, that instinct is judged by people watching telemetry graphs. It's a little like judging an artist's brushstroke based on the paint thickness, not the picture. The data from Mexico told two stories. To Ferrari, it showed a driver managing a difficult car in extreme conditions. To the FIA, it showed a gain that couldn't be ignored. And here's what makes it fascinating. The FIA's own data also revealed that Hamilton lost almost the same amount of time in the following sector that he had gained in the rejoin. In raw numbers, it balanced out. But regulations don't deal in balance, they deal in cause and effect. Hamilton left the track, came back ahead, and the rule was applied. That's why fans saw the same replay and came to totally different conclusions. One side sees a harsh penalty, the other sees consistency. This constant tug-of-war between human intuition and machine precision is what defines modern Formula One. And it's why debates like this will never really go away. Every new sensor, every GPS overlay, every digital layer meant to make the sport fairer also makes it more debatable. Because as data gets sharper, interpretation gets blurrier. Even inside the paddock, engineers quietly admit that telemetry has become both a safety net and a weapon. It helps them understand performance, but it also becomes evidence against their own drivers when something unpredictable happens. So let's turn that question to you. Do you think Formula One should continue relying so heavily on telemetry to make stewarding decisions? Or should there be a stronger emphasis on human context and driver intent? Drop your thoughts below and tell me which side you're on. Pure data, or human judgment. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure you hit that subscribe button and help us reach our 2,000 subscriber goal. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these long-form analyses coming. Up next, we'll look at the part that rarely gets discussed: how car design and altitude shaped this whole controversy before it even began. Because in Mexico, physics wasn't just part of the story, it was the main character. When you strip it back, Mexico was less a one-off incident and more a magnifying glass on competing design philosophies. And that's what made Lap 6 feel so inevitable. Think of it this way: some cars are built to bite into corners with mechanical grip, and others are engineered to generate most of their downforce from the floor and aerodynamic balance. Ferrari's SF25, as the engineers described in the debriefs, leans toward higher mechanical load, lots of surface grip, stable through corners. But it pays a penalty on the straights and when the air thins out. Red Bull's approach is the opposite: lighter aero drag, more floor-generated downforce, which loses proportionally less when the atmosphere thins. At the 2,238-meter elevation of Mexico City, that difference doesn't just matter, it becomes decisive. The air is thinner, so baseline downforce drops across the grid, but it doesn't drop evenly. Cars relying more on bodywork lose more relative grip. Cars optimized for ground effect fare better. The Ferrari, which felt planted in Austin, suddenly felt knife-edged under braking in Mexico. Exactly the condition that produces lockups and unexpected slides. So when Hamilton's front wheels locked and he slid onto the grass, it wasn't purely a driver error in isolation. It was the car reaching a limit that the circuit and altitude made more likely. That context is crucial if you care about fairness, because rules that work at low altitude tracks might not translate cleanly to venues like this. Engineers inside Maranello replayed the exact sequence frame by frame. Brake pressure spikes, airflow changes, temperature drops, and then the rejoin. They concluded the SF25 did what it was designed to do, but the environment exposed the vulnerability of that design choice. Red Bull, with less aero dependency for the same effect, simply behaved differently. That's not a moral judgment, it's engineering reality. Here's where it gets interesting for fans and for the championship. When a circuit amplifies design weaknesses, stewarding decisions suddenly look like they're favoring one philosophy over another, even if unintentionally. Fans see a driver punished. Engineers see a rule applied to numbers. Managers worry about precedent. So consider this. Should circuits with extreme altitude or unique characteristics have stewarding considerations calibrated differently? It's not a radical idea. Motorsport has special rules for wet races, safety cars, and parc fermé situations. So why not for conditions that systematically alter car behaviour? I want your take. In the comments, type ALT if you think high-altitude tracks should have adjusted stewarding thresholds, or type SAME if you think the rules must be universal no matter the conditions. Be short and tell us the main reason behind your choice. Also, quick reminder, if you're enjoying these technical breakdowns and you want more, please subscribe and smash that like button. We're aiming for 2,000 subscribers so we can keep producing deep dives like this one, and your support matters more than you might think. Next up, after you drop your vote, we'll move from design theory back to history. I'll tie the Mexico incident into past controversial stewarding calls and show how those moments shape the sport's rules. If you've been following Formula One for more than a few years, the incident in Mexico probably triggered some serious déjà vu. Because this wasn't the first time Lewis Hamilton, or any top driver, in hand, to Spain themselves at the centre of a grey zone penalty. Think back to Canada 2019, where Sebastian Vettel was penalised for rejoining the track in front of Hamilton after going wide at turn 4. The FIA handed him a 5-second penalty that effectively cost him the victory. Fans exploded with outrage, arguing that Vettel had nowhere else to go and that the penalty destroyed what could have been one of the most dramatic duels of the hybrid era. Sound familiar? Fast forward to Mexico 2025, and we're watching almost the same conversation play out, just with different uniforms, slightly different circumstances, and an equally frustrated seven-time champion. Hamilton's comments after the race echoed Vettel's tone 6 years earlier. What do they expect us to do when the car slides? Teleport? He even mentioned that stewards are too quick to hand out judgment before reviewing the full context. That kind of public frustration is rare from Hamilton, but it shows the emotional toll these rulings can take when they feel inconsistent. And history gives him some ammunition. In 2021, Verstappen and Hamilton had their share of clashes. Remember Brazil, where Verstappen ran Hamilton wide and escaped penalty? Or Austria, 2020, where Lando Norris kept a podium only after the stewards deliberated for nearly an hour over an incident that looked almost identical to what Hamilton did in Mexico. The precedent in F1 has been, let's say, flexible. Fans call it bias. Insiders call it context-dependent stewarding. Either way, it leaves an uneasy sense that interpretations shift based on who's involved or how high the stakes are. And here's the irony. Formula One prides itself on precision. Every bolt, every millisecond, every line on the telemetry is measured. But when it comes to penalties, the human element still rules. Maybe that's unavoidable. Maybe it's even part of the charm. But it's also what fuels these heated debates across social media. The line between hard racing and unsafe re-entry keeps moving. And the sport can't seem to decide where to plant it. So let's turn this into a conversation, because you, the F1 community, know these moments better than anyone. Was Hamilton's penalty another Vettel 2019 moment? Or was it more like Verstappen's Brazil 2021 incident, where the move looked rough, but maybe the punishment didn't fit? Drop a comment below with Vettel, Verstappen, or New Era to tell us which comparison fits best, and why. I'll feature the best takes in our next video. Before we move to the final chapter, where we'll discuss what this means for Hamilton's mindset and his future in Formula One, make sure you've liked this video if you haven't yet. It really helps the algorithm find more F1 fans like you and keeps Fast News F1 growing. Now that the dust has settled on the Mexican Grand Prix, the raw emotion of the moment has turned into something deeper, a question about where Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes go from here. Because this wasn't just about a 5-second penalty. This was about pride, perception, and pressure, all colliding in a single weekend that left the 7-time world champion visibly drained. In his post-race interview, Hamilton's frustration was unfiltered. He said, "It's like no matter what, I can't catch a break. Every time we push hard, it feels like someone's ready to knock us back down." That's not the usual composed Hamilton we're used to seeing. This was a man clearly battling more than just his rivals. He was fighting perception, fatigue, and maybe even faith in how the sport treats its biggest names. When the FIA handed down that penalty, you could almost see the disbelief in his eyes. And when he crossed the line in P6, instead of what could have been a strong podium, it hit hard. Mercedes, for their part, played it cool in public. But behind the scenes, there's quiet frustration brewing. Team principal Toto Wolff reportedly told Sky Germany that the team plans to seek clarification on the consistency of penalty applications, which is diplomatic language for "we're not happy, but we'll keep it professional." According to sources inside the paddock, several engineers were also puzzled by how the same incident could earn a harsher penalty in Mexico than similar ones earlier in the season. Some even felt that Hamilton's reputation as a driver who often pushes the limits may have worked against him in the stewards' room. But here's the bigger question for Mercedes fans. What does this mean for Hamilton mentally? He's in the twilight years of his F1 career, still chasing that elusive 8th world title, and weekends like this one take a toll. Yet, if there's one thing we've learned about Lewis, it's that he thrives in adversity. The man who came back from heartbreak in Abu Dhabi 2021 hasn't lost his edge, he's just channeling it differently now. After the race, he said something that stood out. "They can keep knocking me down, but I'll keep showing up. That's what champions do." It's that mindset that might define the rest of his season. Not just his speed on track, but his willingness to keep fighting when the odds, and sometimes the stewards, seem stacked against him. The next few races will reveal whether Mercedes can give him a car worthy of that fight. But emotionally, the message from Hamilton was clear. He's not done yet. And for the fans, the debate rages on. Was this just another chapter in the long saga of questionable F1 officiating? Or was it a sign that Hamilton is running out of patience with how the sport handles its veterans? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think Lewis should speak out more against the FIA or focus solely on his driving? Type voice if you want him to take a stronger public stand, or focus if you think silence and results are the best answer. Before we wrap up, if you made it this far, thank you. Seriously. Your support helps Fast News F1 grow faster than ever. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so you never miss our next upload. We'll be back breaking down Hamilton's response heading into São Paulo. And trust me, after Mexico, that race could get emotional. Because in Formula One, the line between frustration and fire is razor thin. And for Lewis Hamilton, that line just got a little blurrier.